Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're going to crack the code on the IELTS. We're going to cut right through all the noise and all the myths to give you a clear, honest path forward.
So, if you're preparing for the IELTS, you've probably felt this, right? You're just drowning in a sea of tips, tricks, and so-called secrets from every corner of the internet. It can be totally overwhelming, and it's really hard to know who to trust.
You've probably seen a lot of these tips before. I mean, they sound pretty helpful, maybe even logical, but here's the thing. What do the official sources, the people who actually make the test, like the British Council and IDP, what do they have to say about them?
So in this Explainer, that's what we're going to do. We're going to use those official guidelines to debunk these common myths. We'll build a framework for both the speaking and listening tests that's based on evidence, focusing on what really, truly works. Okay, let's dive in. Let's start with the speaking test, because honestly, this is where the biggest and most misleading myths seem to hang out.
The first myth is this idea that you can sort of charm your way to a higher score. But the truth is that initial greeting, when you walk in, say hello, show your ID, insiders call that part 0. Why? Because it is not being assessed at all. And hey, don't just take my word for it. This is straight from the source. The official IELTS website says it right there. Your score is based on your English, not your personality or how friendly you are. The clock only really starts ticking when part 1 begins.
And it's a similar story with body language. There's this huge emphasis online about making eye contact and using hand gestures. But listen, while sitting up straight might help you feel more relaxed, it is not part of the evaluation. The examiner is listening to what you say, not watching how you sit.
So the takeaway here is to forget about putting on a performance. Focus all that energy on the conversation and the topic itself. Your score comes from your grammar, your vocabulary, your pronunciation, and your fluency. In other words, the words coming out of your mouth.
Now this is a huge one. This myth that you have to use these big, complex academic words to sound smart. But trying to force these words into a conversation usually just backfires. It hurts your fluency score because you end up hesitating and sounding really unnatural.
Instead, experts recommend something much smarter called the moon landing strategy. Think of it this way. During your preparation, absolutely take risks. Experiment, go wild, try new words. But on test day, just like the actual moon landing, you play it safe. You stick to the words and phrases you know 100% inside and out.
And this is exactly why memorizing answers for common topics is such a trap. Examiners are trained to spot this from a mile away. They might ask you a standard question, and then, bam, they'll throw you a curveball about something totally random, like hats or jewelry, just to see how you really communicate when you're not reciting a script.
Okay, let's switch gears and move on to the listening test. And you're going to see a theme here. Just like with speaking, success isn't about memorizing tricks. It's about really understanding the test's hidden blueprint.
Now, what's really interesting here is how this slide breaks down the test's architecture. Each of the 4 parts is different, and that means each one requires a specific kind of practice. You wouldn't use a TED Talk to prepare for the simple social conversation in part 1, right? You've got to match your practice to the task at hand. And you have to do it for 30 minutes straight, no breaks. This is a test of mental stamina just as much as it's a test of listening. I mean, think about it. Most of us have probably never had to focus on English audio for that long without a single pause.
So what do? Well, you train for it like a marathon. You don't just go out and try to run 25 miles on your first day. You start small, focus for 5 minutes, then the next day, 10, then 15, gradually building up that listening muscle over time.
Part of understanding the blueprint is knowing about the predictable challenges built into the test. Now, these aren't really tricks designed to fool you, but they are designed to separate the good listeners from the great ones.
And this slide just perfectly illustrates the patterns you can learn to spot. They use synonyms instead of the exact words from the question. They'll use distractors where someone changes their mind. They'll use negative words to completely flip the meaning. Once you know these patterns, you can start to anticipate them. For instance, a classic distractor is the changed answer. You'll hear someone say one thing, and then they correct themselves. You want to listen for those little phrases like, oh wait, or actually, or no, sorry. That second piece of information, that is almost always the correct answer.
So, knowing the myths and the traps is one thing, but how do you put it all together to actually get better? Well, this brings us to what I think is the most important takeaway of this entire explainer.
We've all heard that saying, practice makes perfect. But you know what? It's not quite right. The real goal isn't just to do a bunch of practice tests. It's to practice in a really smart, systematic way.
This 4-step loop right here is the absolute key to making real improvement. First, only use official test materials. Second, you have to recreate real exam conditions. No pausing, no cheating. Third, and this is the most critical step where the magic happens, deeply analyze every single mistake. Don't just mark it wrong. Read the audio script and figure out why you missed it. And then finally, you target that specific weakness in your next study session.
So, the real secret to cracking the IELTS code, well, it isn't a secret at all. It's about shifting your mindset, moving away from hunting for quick tricks, and instead building real strategic skill. And why does this matter so much? Because this approach puts you, not some random tip you found online, in complete control of your own success.